Yeah, before getting started, like you wanted to have like what and all topics we will get covered during this course, right?
Ah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So, so these are the topics which we'll be covering.
Okay.
So initially, we'll have an introduction, yeah, which we have completed yesterday, and then the Citrix
Uh-huh.
infra core components,
Hmm.
and we'll be starting with the lab setup where we
Okay.
will be installing and configuring Active Directory along with the
Hmm.
DHCP and DNS. And
Okay.
then we'll move on to the Citrix component where we'll be
Okay.
deploying and configuring Citrix license server. Then it'll be storefront server. For HA,
Hmm.
we'll be trying to add one more server, and we'll have two servers, two storefront servers configured, and we'll test it
Okay.
with Active Directory uh, round robin load balance. Because since we don't have
Okay.
NetScaler in place, we'll try to do whatever possibility with the Active Directory and DNS. We'll try to do that. So that
Okay.
one will cover, and then the delivery controller with along with the Studio and Director console, and the
Hmm.
hypervisor will be using a Zen server for
Okay.
hosting the environment. And then
Hmm.
with the imaging part, we'll be covering MCS, preparing a master image, creating a machine catalog using MCS, and delivery group configuration and image update, and
Okay.
rolling out the image to the catalog. And
Okay.
the second part would be PVS introduction, PVS infrastructure architecture details, and then we'll be installing the environment, then preparing a master image and creating a mission catalog with PVS and delivery group and image update process and PVS high availability. So these will be on part of your imaging process, MCS and PVS. Then
Hmm.
we'll see how to publish an application on desktop and touch base on Citrix policies.
Okay.
Then on the profiling part, like would you like me to touch on VEM or FS Logic? Either one of
FS.
the profiling tool, FS Logic. Okay.
I know a little bit about FS Logics. VEM. What is
Okay.
VEM? Is
This is a similar kind of a tool which is from the Workspace Environment Manager. VEM is
uh-huh.
the abbreviation to it, and it is a profiling tool which is from the Citrix end. They are using it.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I mean, let's. I mean, it'd be nice to have knowledge of both, then, if
Okay.
possible.
Yeah, if time permits, yeah, we'll try to touch
Yeah.
base on both. But your
Yeah.
primary request is on FS Logic, so will the
Okay.
primary consideration will take into FS Logic. If we have time, yeah, definitely we'll touch base on VEM also.
Okay.
Okay. And the remaining key part is troubleshooting.
Okay. Yeah, that's the
Okay.
key part.
Yeah. So you're fine with the content, what we are going to see for the next few
Ah,
couple of days. Okay.
yeah.
Yeah. Good. Good.
Did
So this.
would you, if there's any kind of automation, you
Yeah,
can
yeah.
expose
On
me?
PowerShell part, yeah, on PowerShell part, yeah, definitely we'll touch base.
Okay. Thank you.
Once we have done with all the course content, because PowerShell
Yep.
it's all together a different tool or component. But once we touch base all
Okay.
these things, yeah, definitely we'll
Yep.
touch base on PowerShell
Awesome.
and try to do Citrix infrastructure monitoring, automation, all those things we can touch base.
Okay. Got it.
Okay. So these are the topics we will get covered. If in case you have anything that we can add it up, which we can cover it on the later part, like once we cover all these primary topics, we can definitely get in touch with that.
Okay.
Okay.
So.
Yeah. So yeah. So yesterday, yeah, you were asking about
Oh yeah. Oh nice. Okay.
a
This one.
diagram.
Very
Yeah.
good. Okay. So it's
So this doesn't have a net scaler, but if you
okay.
have a net scaler, again, it will be using the port number 80 or 443. And you, as you can see the communication, how it works. So from the client end, you see the receiver, it's client one. From there, the communication goes to the Citrix storefront server, or if you want to have NetScaler, and from NetScaler, the communication goes back to your storefront, and from there it will go to your delivery controller. From there, it will go to your Active Directory to validate your user credentials. Okay, so it'll be using up the
Okay.
port numbers, which are you see it on the screen, 389.636.3268. So once the validation happens, again from the Active Directory, the information is again passed on to the delivery controller. From there, it will goes to the Citrix storefront server and to the client. If in case
Mm,
we have a Netscaler in place, then the user authentication, the user will be presented with the page, and user will communicate to the connect to the page, and then from the Netscaler it will directly go to Active Directory, because on Netscaler we'll have the LDAP configuration already in place to resolve the user authentication and everything. So it will not directly go to storefront, it will first from user end go to Netscaler. From Netscaler it will directly go to Active Directory. Once the user
mm,
validation is done, it'll again come back to the client, and from there it'll again go back to Netscaler, and from Netscaler it'll go back to the storefront, and the rest of the process would remain the same.
okay. Okay.
Okay, so
Yeah.
from once the validation is done, then again user the client will again go back to the storefront. The reason why, because to storefront, because storefront, the configuration on storefront, it will be delivery control. You can either add the Active Directory, but the default configuration it will be store delivery controller. So from the storefront it will go to the delivery controller, and from there it will go to Active Directory. There is an option in storefront where we can configure Active Directory also, but in general they'll keep it as a delivery controller, because you have your Netscaler gateway in place, so that it will directly communicate to the Active Directory and do the LDAP configuration, all those things. So
Okay.
once this is done, the delivery controller, once the validation everything is completed, the delivery controller verify with the SQL database what are the published application, published desktop, and respective policies which are applied to the user profile. It will verify everything on the SQL database, and those information again will switch back to delivery controller, and delivery controller will check for the licensing part. If there is any free licensing, it'll get a license for this particular user. And also the SQL server give you the information about the server where the application is published and how much the load the server is. For example, uh, a notepad application or a web desktop which you have published, it might be having multiple servers configured to it. Okay, so in your environment, if you have thousands of users, 1,000 users cannot connect to the same server. So whatever server which is available with free load, the SQL server will have the information about the load details, so it will give the details to the delivery controller. So based on the first come first serve free load, the delivery controller will redirect the connection from the client end to the respective servers.
Okay.
Okay, so the delivery controller will also have a connection with your VDI hosting infrastructure, that is your hypervisor. It could be cloud, it could be VMware, it could be Nutanix, or it could be Zen server. So the communication happens because it needs to contacts to the VDA servers or VDA desktops. So that will happen. And here the management server is the file server. If you have any profiling tool or something, or for FS Logic, you need to have a profile server file server where you need to keep your profiles, right, user profiles. So in that scenario, it will try to contact to that server also and get the details. Once this is done,
Um, yeah.
yeah.
On the course topic, what they provided at the company,
Hmm.
it's similar to it, but it's they some of the things which do you have that one, or do you want me to forward it to you? Okay, can you just check and see? Because I think there was quite a bit of troubleshooting things
Hmm.
in there. I don't know. You can look at it and see, and then see if there's anything we can integrate together into our. Uh, Mostly, it's managing. Do you have that one with you, or if not, I can forward it over
Uh,
to you.
yeah, can you give it to me? I also check
Yeah,
with
yeah,
Sahana on this one.
yeah, yeah. Uh, I think it was sent. Okay, let me download it and I'll send it to you, and then maybe you can compare it. You will know better.
Okay.
Say, I can forward it to you from here. Awesome. Forward to. we have a group now, right?
Yeah, we have
Uh,
it.
uh, oh, it's called CJ.
CJ2402.
Mm-hmm. There you go.
Yeah,
Just send it over.
just give me a minute. I'm just going
Yeah,
through
yeah.
it. Okay, so on the fourth topic, right, module four, troubleshooting your Zen desktop solutions, right? Troubleshooting
Yeah,
delivery
yeah.
controller, virtual agent, license issue, common printing issue, user connectivity issues, tricks policies, tricks issues, application performance. Yeah, I think yeah we can cover most of the topics except
Awesome.
to the NetScale gateway, since we
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
cannot
We can
have it.
skip
Yeah,
that one. Yeah.
yeah. I think the rest of the things, yeah, we can definitely cover it
Okay,
because
cool.
along with this, I think, mm, yeah, I think with previous troubleshooting, yeah, we'll cover it here and also with the
Okay.
MCS. And once the environment setup, will try to create a scenario based issues like if
Yeah.
yeah if service goes down, how the end users will connect, how it'll impact the end users. So
What are the
all those
scenarios?
scenarios,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, we can try that during troubleshooting session. Yeah, definitely
Please.
we'll definitely cover the topics on troubleshooting.
Awesome. Yeah, because I'll have users calling me with different issues. I rather at
Hmm.
least have some knowledge of
Hmm.
where to go, how to look for, and
Okay.
okay, amazing.
Yeah,
Awesome.
yeah. Once this entire setup is ready,
Mm-hmm.
we'll after publishing application and desktops, we'll start on troubleshooting. We'll create a
Okay.
live scenario.
Yeah.
We'll stop the service for something, and we'll try to launch the application, and we'll try to
Oh,
uh, power of database server, and we'll try to see how the application works and whether it is getting launched or all those scenarios. We'll try to see it on troubleshooting.
amazing. All right. Cool. Cool.
Okay. Yeah, and
Awesome.
with the document which they've sent, it's a 7.6 version. That is the older one. Okay, we'll try to
Uh-huh.
go with the new one. Okay, either
Okay.
7.203 or 1912, something like that. Okay,
Okay. Okay.
yeah, and yeah. So coming back to this, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So the enumeration process is the primary thing. Like once we have a clear idea how the enumeration works, then it will be easy for us to troubleshoot where the issues like. Like for example, user
Okay.
might be saying like he is not able to launch the application, he is not able to see the application. So in that scenario, user might not having the client. So he's trying
Uh,
to open up the web page because the web portal will launch it. Once that is
uh,
done, it will request for the ICA file to get downloaded. If user doesn't know how to use the HTML5 browser, then it will download the ICA file, but it will not launch anything. It will ask for how to open this particular file. So in that scenario, like we can request a user to download the client. And
mm,
sometimes there might be some firewall which is blocking it, or uh, VPN connection or Zscaler, like for in some companies where you need to have a your antivirus updated, otherwise you will not be able to connect to your Citrix environment. So those kind of policies configuration they would have configured it. So
okay.
we have a number of scenarios where we'll have it.
Okay.
So yeah, so with this enumeration process, we'll come to know how to troubleshoot it or how the environment works, because it will be common for most of the environment where in specific to user or client requirement, your firewall might change. It might be NetScaler gateway, or it might be a file load balancer, or they might be using some other tools which is available in the market, which are cost effective or effective on the management part. Okay,
Excellent.
so you have any queries on this one enumeration process, Rajiv?
No, I will go through this again. Thank you
Okay,
for making this up. This is much more helpful. I can kind of
okay,
follow the numbers and the port number as well. So yeah, very good. Thank you so
no,
much.
great. So moving on to, okay, so
Oh,
this is a more brief on how the communication happens
uh-huh.
on the enumeration process. So for example, if we have the NetScaler gateway in place, okay, the client will send the communication to the NetScaler gateway. Like you will be providing your, I mean, the web page, you will be providing your
Mm-hmm.
user ID and password. Okay, so once
Okay.
that is done, the communication between the client and the NetScaler gateway will happen. So it will be HTTP or HTTPS request based on the
Okay.
certificate you have it on your gateway. So the client will send a request to gateway, a NetScaler gateway, and the NetScaler gateway will acknowledge it and will send a certificate. Once the initial communication between the client and the NetScaler gateway happens, the next part is from the gateway, it will connect directly to the Active Directory. As I mentioned earlier, gateway on Gateway Citrix NetScaler gateway, you can configure Active Directory directly. So the authentication doesn't need to go back again to storefront and from there to delivery controller and from there to Active Directory. So on NetScaler gateway, you will be configuring your Active Directory so that the authentication can directly communicate directly to your Active Directory and return the request. So the NetScaler
Oh,
gateway will try to
oh,
contact first the Active Directory and verify whether
uh-huh.
the user is the right one and the user ID and password which user is given is the correct one. Once
Uh-huh.
every verification is done, the Active Directory will
Uh-huh.
send the request back to NetScaler gateway, and from there it will again go back to your client.
Oh,
Okay.
okay, cool, cool.
So
Okay.
once the authentication everything is done, again the client will request to the NetScaler gateway that I need to access the Citrix environment where I need to open up an application or a desktop. So the NetScaler gateway again acknowledges the request, and then it will directly connect to your storefront server. Okay,
Mm,
which is configured
mm,
on your NetScaler gateway. Okay,
mm.
once the communication from the NetScaler gateway goes to storefront, the storefront again send back the request to direct to delivery controller here to get the information about the published application and the desktop.
Okay.
Okay, so again storefile will make a verification about the user authentication, the user ID and password. It'll from here it will directly connect to your delivery controller and from there it will go to your Active Directory. So
Okay.
storefront also in turn will verify again once it gets the request from the NetScaler gateway.
Okay.
Okay. So once the NetScaler gateway and the storefront acknowledges that this is the right user and he is part of our domain and he need access to our Citrix published application or a desktop. So this is the process. So client again will go back to NetScaler gateway. From there it will go to the storefront page and there it will check your delivery controller and what are VDA server that is available in our environment, which are free and which are ready to use for the end users. It'll give you the information from the delivery controller to storefront page, and from the storefront page it will go to NetScaler gateway, and from there it will go to the client.
Mm,
Okay, so once that is done, ICA file will get generated where it will have the information about your VDA server where the application is loaded or the application is published. So that file once it can you could have seen once you try to log into the web page on the Google browser, it might be downloading the ICA file, right? Once you click on it, it'll launch the application or a desktop. So the ICA file will have all those information. It'll be generated from the storefront and it'll forwarded to Citrix NetScaler gateway, and from there it directly comes to the client. So if the ICA file have all this information, then it will launch up the desktop or application.
Oh, so the file which downloads, I've seen that file gets downloaded.
Yeah,
It has
yeah.
all these information inside it.
Yes,
Okay.
you can open open the ICA file in a notepad. You could see there would be list of configuration, IP details, server details, all those things will be there.
Oh, nice. That's a good troubleshooting mechanism also.
Yeah. So
Good, good,
for
good.
here also there is one on the troubleshooting part which I'll explain. Like if in case there might be some scenario where user will not be able to connect directly to the gateway or storefront page, they'll have some issues. So there is an
Uh-huh.
option to generate the ICA file which will directly connect to the delivery controller and connect directly to the server instead of going this process from client to
Huh.
gateway and storefront page. It will directly connect to your delivery controller and the respective VDA server. But the
Hmm.
key point which we have to take into consideration here is like the user should be within your office environment or within your office network.
Hmm.
Like if he is
Hmm.
an external user, just give me a minute. I'm just going
Yeah,
through
yeah.
it. Okay, so on the fourth topic, right, module four, troubleshooting your Zen desktop solutions, right?
Yeah,
Troubleshooting
yeah,
delivery
yeah.
controller, virtual agent license issue, common printing issue, user connectivity issues, tricks policies, tricks issues, application performance. Yeah, I think yeah we can cover most of the topics except
Awesome.
to the Netscaler gateway since we
Yep.
cannot
We can
have it.
skip
Yeah,
that part. Yeah.
yeah. I think the rest of the things, yeah, we can definitely cover it
Okay,
because
cool.
along with this, I, mm, yeah, I think with the previous troubleshooting, yeah, we'll cover it here and also with the
Okay.
MCS. And once the environment setup, we'll try to create a scenario based issues like if
Yeah.
yeah if service goes down, how the end users will connect, how it'll impact the end users. So
What are the
all those
scenarios?
scenarios,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, we can try that during troubleshooting session. Yeah, definitely
Please.
we'll definitely cover the topics on troubleshooting.
Awesome. Yeah, because I'll have users calling me with different issues. I rather at
Hmm.
least have some knowledge of
Mm.
where to go, how to look for, and
Okay.
that'll be amazing.
Yeah,
Awesome.
yeah. Once this entire setup is ready,
Mm-hmm.
we'll after publishing application and desktops, we'll start on troubleshooting. We'll create a
Okay.
live scenario.
Yeah.
We'll stop the service for something, and we'll try to launch the application, and we'll try to
Oh,
uh, power off database server, and we'll try to see how the application works and whether it is getting launched or all those scenarios. We'll try to see it on troubleshooting.
amazing. All right. Cool. Cool.
Okay. Yeah, and
Awesome.
with the document which they have sent, it's a 7.6 version. That is the older one. Okay, we'll try to
Uh-huh.
go with the new one. Okay, either
Okay.
7.203 or 1912, something like that. Okay,
Okay. Okay.
yeah, and yeah. So coming back to this, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So the enumeration process is the primary thing. Like once we have a clear idea how the enumeration works, then it will be easy for us to troubleshoot where the issues like. Like for example, user
Okay.
might be saying like he is not able to launch the application, he is not able to see the application. So in that scenario, user might not have having the client. So he's trying to
Uh-huh.
open up the web page because the web portal will launch it. Once that is
Uh-huh.
done, it will request for the ICA file to get downloaded. If user doesn't know how to use the HTML5 browser, then it will download the ICA file, but it will not launch anything. It will ask for how to open this particular file. So in that scenario, like we can request a user to download the client. And
Mm.
sometimes there might be some firewall which is blocking it, or uh, VPN connection or Zscaler. Like for in some companies where you need to have a your antivirus updated, otherwise you will not be able to connect to your Citrix environment. So those kind of policies configuration they would have configured it. So
Okay.
we have a number of scenarios where we'll have it. So
Okay.
so yeah. So With this enumeration process, we'll come to know how to troubleshoot it or how the environment works, because it will be common for most of the environment where in specific to user or client requirement, your firewall might change. It might be NetScaler gateway, or it might be a file load balancer, or they might be using some other tools which is available in the market, which are cost effective or effective on the management part. Okay,
Right.
so you have any queries on this one enumeration process, Rajiv?
No, I will go through this again. Thank you
Okay,
for making this up. This is much more helpful. I can kind of
okay,
follow the numbers and the port number as well. So yeah, very good. Thank you so
no,
much.
great. So moving on to, okay, so
Ah,
this is a more brief on how the communication happens
uh-huh.
on the enumeration process. So for example, if we have the NetScaler gateway in place, okay, the client will send the communication to the NetScaler gateway. Like you will be providing your, I mean, the web page, you will be providing your user
Mm-hmm.
ID and password. Okay. So once
Okay.
that is done, the communication between the client and the NetScaler gateway will happen. So it will be HTTP or HTTPS request based on the
Okay.
certificate you have it on your gateway. So the client will send a request to gateway, a NetScaler gateway, and the NetScaler gateway will acknowledge it and will send a certificate. Once the initial communication between the client and the NetScaler gateway happens, the next part is from the gateway, it will connect directly to the Active Directory. As I mentioned earlier, gateway on Gateway Citrix NetScaler gateway, you can configure Active Directory directly. So the authentication doesn't need to go back again to storefront and from there to delivery controller and from there to Active Directory. So on NetScaler gateway, you will be configuring your Active Directory so that the authentication can directly communicate directly to your Active Directory and return the request. So the NetScaler
Oh,
gateway will try to
oh,
contact first the Active Directory and verify whether
uh-huh.
the user is the right one and the user ID and password which user is given is the correct one. Once
Uh-huh.
every verification is done, the Active Directory will
Uh-huh.
send the request back to NetScaler gateway, and from there it will again go back to your client.
Oh,
Okay.
okay, cool, cool.
So
Okay.
once the authentication everything is done, again the client will request to the NetScaler gateway that I need to access the Citrix environment where I need to open up an application or a desktop. So the NetScaler gateway again acknowledges the request, and then it will directly connect to your storefront server. Okay,
Mm,
which is configured
mm,
on your NetScaler gateway. Okay,
mm.
once the communication from the NetScaler gateway goes to storefront, the storefront again send back the requests to direct to delivery controller here to get the information about the published application and the desktop.
Okay.
Okay, so again storefile will make a verification about the user authentication, the user ID and password. It'll from here it will directly connect to your delivery controller and from there it will go to your Active Directory. So
Okay.
storefront also in turn will verify again once it gets the request from the NetScaler gateway.
Okay.
Okay. So once the NetScaler gateway and the storefront acknowledges that this is the right user and he is part of our domain and he need access to our Citrix published application or a desktop. So this is the process. So client again will go back to NetScaler gateway. From there, it will go to the storefront page, and there it will check your delivery controller and what are VDA server that is available in our environment, which are free and which are ready to use for the end users. It'll give you the information from the delivery controller to storefront page, and from the storefront page, it will go to NetScaler gateway, and from there, it will go to the client.
Mm,
Okay, so once that is done, ICA file will get generated where it will have the information about your VDA server, where the application is loaded or the application is published. So that file, once it can, you could have seen once you try to log into the web page on the Google browser, it might be downloading the ICA file, right? Once you click on it, it will launch the application or a desktop. So the ICA file will have all those information. It'll be generated from the storefront and it'll forwarded to Citrix NetScaler gateway, and from there it directly comes to the client. So if the ICA file have all this information, then it will launch up the desktop or application.
Oh, so the file which downloads, I've seen that file gets downloaded.
Yeah,
It has
yeah.
all these information inside it.
Yes,
Okay.
you can open open the ICA file in a notepad. You could see there would be list of configuration, IP details, server details, all those things will be there.
Oh, nice. That's a good troubleshooting mechanism also.
Yeah. So
Good, good,
for
good.
here also there is one on the troubleshooting part which I'll explain. Like if in case there might be some scenario where user will not be able to connect directly to the gateway or storefront page, they'll have some issues. So there is an
Uh-huh.
option to generate the ICA file which will directly connect to the delivery controller and connect directly to the server instead of going this process from client to
Huh.
gateway and storefront page. It will directly connect to your delivery controller and the respective VDA server. But the
Hmm.
key point which we have to take into consideration here is like the user should be within your office environment or within your office delivery controller, right? So the machine creation services will help you on that. And similarly for monitoring services, uh, uh, and delegated administrator services, all those things will come into picture with all these
Hmm.
services. So once we deploy the delivery control, we'll come to know what and all
Hmm.
services that is there on the server, and we can identify for each service respective roles and responsibilities. So with the
Oh,
versions, yeah, from the older version, if you have used it 7.6 or 7.8, it could be less than a 6 or 8 services. With the advance of new versions coming into picture, it came up. Right now it's almost close to 18 services which is required, that will be running. For each services will be doing a different task.
got it.
Okay. And these services also play important role where you have your HA in place. Like for example, you will be having definitely two delivery controller in place, right? You could have seen
Hmm.
election process would take place between one delivery controller to the other delivery controller, right? In
Hmm.
the event where you can find it, or we can try to replicate the same on our lab to see which delivery controller is selected as the primary delivery controller, so
Hmm.
that it'll act that primary delivery controller will act for the communication between the client end and to your Citrix environment. If that
Hmm.
particular server goes down, or server goes down, the other server, the other delivery controller will have a communication. They'll have a heartbeat communication. So that's where these services will take into I mean this communication I mean this communication happens with the broker service. If any server,
Hmm.
the broker service goes down, the other server which is active, it will try to communicate to this particular server via broker server. If it identifies that server is down or the service is not responding back, then immediately an election process will trigger in, which you cannot see it manually, but on the event viewer, once we go it to the particular server, if you go to the event viewer, we can identify which server has been elected as the primary delivery controller.
Hmm.
So this HA will happen based on your broker services availability. Okay. If the broker server is down, or if the particular server is down, this heartbeat gets disconnected, the automatically the next server will pitch in, and it will elect himself as a primary delivery controller, and then it will start on the process. So on the user end, you will not find any latencies or any disconnection on this selection part, because it will automatically done and it will be immediately done within a fraction of seconds.
Hmm.
Okay, so once one delivery controller goes down, the other will automatically pitch in. If in case both the delivery controllers are working fine, but if your SQL server has some issues, then it will use the localhost cache, which is there from the older environment. Earlier, localhost cache will have almost all the information which is getting updated onto your SQL. It will have a cache which is inbuilt by default. It will have it. So if in case the server goes down, SQL server goes down, it will use up the localhost cache and it will work. With the newer version, this cache will pitch in for only for 14 days.
Hmm.
Okay, earlier, until or unless you don't reset the cache or you don't restart the server, it will be there. The user connection can connect, but here only for 14 days.
Okay.
Okay, so in that 14 days, whatever user, I mean, whoever the user who have connected to the environment, it should be static desktop and it should be published application. Okay, dynamic or pooled desktop it will not work. Okay, it should be a static desktop and published application. If user is already connected and the cache is there within that 14 days period, it will work. So the end user
Oh,
will be able to connect and work.
okay.
Okay, if it is going to be a new user who is connecting to the environment, no, it will not work because it doesn't have any
Oh,
cache on your delivery controller, so it will not launch. So that time user will be facing an issue.
oh,
Okay, so that's where, as we mentioned yesterday, like SQL Server requires those mirroring HA availability if in case any downtime that comes into picture.
okay.
So initial planning we have to keep it in a such a way like how the SQL Server will be and how the load balancing will be for the SQL Server, and then we can calculate our environment and we can build the respective delivery controller. Ideally,
Mm,
two delivery controller is fine, but based on the user count, if it goes beyond 3,000 or 4,000, it's always better to have three delivery controller or four delivery controller in place so that the load can be equally distributed across all the delivery controllers.
mm,
Okay, so the primary will be there, the secondary and the secondary and the other will be there. The VDA communication will happen. It can communicate to any one of the delivery controller and it can get registered to any one of the delivery controller. But the primary delivery controller from the client end, that will get contact to the primary delivery controller. But internally, the VDA registration can happen to any one of the delivery controllers. First come
mm.
first serve.
Okay.
Okay, so once you open the console on the delivery controller, you could see the list of connections. It not the primary server will be having all the VDA agent connected to it. You could see the other server also will have the a list of servers communicating or connected to its to the servers. On the studio console, you can see it. Once we deploy the virtual machines and lab, we I can show it how many servers are getting connected to which delivery controller and how that works.
Mm, okay.
Okay, so there is an option called auto update, which is by default configured. So it will pick up the list of free or easily available delivery controller, and it will get and the VD agent will try to communicate to that particular delivery controller, and it will get registered with that delivery controller. Okay, if that particular delivery controller goes down, it will automatically choose the from the list of services which is there on its registry entry. It will be configured during the installation or with the GPU configuration. Either ways we can do it. So whatever the server it's listing down there, it'll try to connect and it'll register itself.
Mm,
Okay. And during the SQL outage, you could find one more thing like most of the server states will become an unknown on the console.
mm,
That could
okay.
also could happen. Yeah. So you
Yeah.
you will not be able to power manage your server. If the state becomes
Mm,
unknown, you will not be able to restart or power off the server from the studio
mm-hmm.
console. That is also
Ah,
one thing you cannot do it.
okay.
Or this scenario, you can see it when the hypervisor has some issues, connection issues. You could see most of the servers or all the servers on the particular hypervisor, the power state will become unknown. Whereas you can
Ah,
connect to your hypervisor and see the server, you can do the restart, but from the console, you cannot do it.
mm,
Okay, in that scenario, uh, verify the communication from your delivery controller to your hosting server is working fine. So on the hosting part, if you click it, there you will have an option to test the connection. You can do the test connection. If that works fine, then your communication from your delivery controller to the hypervisor, it's fine. Maybe some underlying, maybe they would have done some firmware upgrade or patch update which could have caused this. So there might they have to from their hypervisor end, they might need to do a service restart or rebalance those server from one cluster to another cluster, which might resolve the issue.
mm,
Okay, so these are some of the uh, troubleshooting steps or things which you can take into consideration, like when some services goes down.
mm.
Okay, So till this part, you have any questions or query, Origi?
No, right now it's theory, so yeah,
Yeah.
I'm
So
okay
I
with
from Monday onwards, I think we can get into lab and we can start everything. Okay.
it. Okay.
So first thing, as we mentioned, yeah, we'll install the Active Directory. Then we'll try to install the license server. I'll try
Mm,
to download a trial license. I'll also see. I mean, we can see the process how to download the license file and how to configure it on the license server. Once that is
okay.
done, yeah, we'll go on to the storefront and delivery control, the next part. So
Sounds.
for lab environment, so this will be the our lab setup. So we'll have
Mm-hmm.
one AD initially,
Uh-huh.
one license server, and one storefront, one DLC, and SQL Server. So we'll start the lab with this component, and later on
Mm-hmm.
we'll be adding one more server for HA here and
Mm-hmm.
one more server for HA here, and we'll have a VDA agent. Could be Windows 2016 or Windows 10. Either
Okay.
of it we can try it. So
Mm-hmm.
once we done with this one, we'll go back to first PVS and then MCS.
Okay.
Okay. So once this HA everything we tested it, I'll
Mm-hmm.
I'll I'll be powering off the HA server. I mean the second
Mm-hmm.
server because of the resource constraint. So
Mm-hmm.
once we are moving into PVS or MCS, so we'll have only one storefront server, one delivery controller, and SQL server will be
Okay.
running, and VDA
Mm.
agent. Okay, and
Got it.
we'll install the Zen server as the hypervisor. Okay, and as we mentioned, we'll also deploy FS logics. So with FS logic, we'll be covering two primary things, one on the profiling part, one on the app masking.
Mm.
Okay, there is one more, it is that is Java rule, Java, but since we don't have any a specific Java application, so it will be difficult to for us to test this one, but definitely app masking we can test it.
Mm. Okay.
Okay, so on FS logic, I can give a simple overview like what to say. It's a more easy tool to interact with because it doesn't
Mm-hmm.
require any management console or something like that. Because for them, I think you would have heard, I mean, worked on absence.
Mm.
That is also one
Mm.
profiling tool which is there in the market, which is very good in terms
Mm.
of administration part and controlling the environment. A similar, what to say, mm, it requires a different infrastructure altogether. From there, you can control
Mm.
all your profiling part underneath HKCU. You can do it. We can deploy an application. You can run an application when user launches a desktop. All those things you can do it via absence. So that is very good tool. With FS Logic, yeah, we don't have those kind of administration console onto it. We need to just have the agent installed onto your server, and then through group policy, we need to configure your profile, like how much data it requires, where your file server will be kept, and you have to enable your FS Logic agent. Once all this done, user connects in, his or her profile will be attached as a VST file.
Mm.
Once the user connect into the environment, you could see on the computer management disk part, disk management, you could see the profile is added as a VST file. Okay,
Mm.
normally it will be like on SQL and users you can find all those details, but on the disk management, if you see it, it will be added as a VST file. Default it will be 30 GB, we can reduce it to 1 GB, 2 GB, or whatever it is based on our requirement. Once that is done, you could see the VHD file getting attached to it, to that particular size onto the server. There can be n number of users who can connect to that particular server. You could see all those VHD file getting attached to it.
Mm.
Okay, so that's where the FS logic and app masking is. It's a tool, very good tool from FS logic, where you can do the restriction to the end users. For example,
Mm.
user should not access control panel. User should not access certain application. For example, in a shared environment where the servers will have n number of application getting installed and used by
Mm.
respective business team. So, for
Mm.
example, you have Foxit editor, which is a licensed version, or for Adobe Reader, which is a licensed version. It should be accessed only with the few users, and the rest of the users should not see it or use it. Yeah, those restriction can be done with app masking. So
Oh.
those configuration we can do it. Like for example, this AD group user should see I mean Foxit reader. This particular AD group should not see Foxit reader. Yeah, we can do that with app masking. What it does is it will remove the shortcuts from the desktop, from the start menu, as well as the application listing which is on their add or remove programs, or app console.
Mm.
Even the user will not be able to see the application there when they try to remove add
Mm.
or remove programs. If you go there, user will not be able to see it once you make the restriction. If it is
Mm.
enabled, user can see the shortcuts from the desktop, from the start menu, as well as on the add or remove programs,
Mm.
and also store. So this is a very effective tool which we can test it and see it doing during our lab. And for
Okay.
Java, like you would have seen, like for certain links you require a specific Java version. If you have a
Mm-hmm.
higher version or lower version also, the link will not work properly. So in this scenario,
Mm.
you can restrict, like for particular URL, it should use, because on the same shared environment you can install multiple Java version. But
Mm-hmm.
if the user is trying to access the web link, if it is as a multiple version, it might have an impact. It will not open the application properly. So with this Java restriction, we can make a modification, like this particular URL should use this particular version of Java. It will not check on the other part. It will just use that particular version. For example, 156, 158, or something, whichever we configured it. So when user try to launch that particular link, it will directly go to that particular server, a particular version, and it will use it up. So it will not mess up with other version. So the end user will not have any impact or any issues on launching the application, specifically to
Mm.
Java.
Okay.
So these are the uh, uh, key things which we can take into consideration for FS Logic, and it's very simple to configure. You don't require any management tool required to see all those things. Once you done with your group policy perfectly, then it will work flawlessly.
Okay.
Okay, so we'll check on this also. We need to have a file server for this to save all the PST. So whatever topic we covered, do you have any queries or any doubts, uh, Rajiv?
Right now, not that many. I mean, it's pretty straightforward. Mo- Once we start building things, we may,
Okay,
and
okay,
things may break that. So no problem
okay,
right now.
okay, got it. So with this, we'll hold on to the theory part. Okay, from
Yep.
tomorrow onwards, we'll start on
Mm-hmm.
building the labs. I think we are
Okay.
10 minutes early to close the session. Is it fine for you? Like,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
because
no problem. And
okay,
so you will build the lab, and I'll build it parallelly with you, and
yeah,
that
yeah, we
way.
can do that. Yeah, we can do that. So if you have any queries, you can share your desktop. From here we can try to troubleshoot it.
Troubleshoot
That
it.
is
Yeah.
that is possible. Yeah, I think
Okay.